Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Shelby, and if you were here, you were probably interested in trying to figure out how to make fitness work for you in a season that is not ideal. Today, I really want to focus on talking about how to get the most bang for your buck out of your fitness routine when you are short on time. And that short on time can be coming from lots of different reasons. For me, most recently, it's been becoming a mom and just not having as much time as I used to be at the gym, get to the gym, get workouts in, get steps in, and so on. It could be due to your job taking up lots of time, lots of hours, and you just not having as much going on outside of that, or having enough time to have things going on outside of that. It could be due to long commutes. It could just be whatever the current season is, that it's just been really hard to get what you would like out of the gym and your fitness. And so I'm not going to talk about nutrition at all in this. We are simply talking about fitness, so we'll make time for that another day to talk about fitness, to talk about nutrition. I'm getting ahead of myself. Today, really, I just want to talk to you about how to get the most bang for your buck out of your fitness routine when you are short on time due to the current season. So let's dive into that. So fitness is one of those things, and improving your fitness. And when I talk about fitness, I'm talking strength training, cardio training, all of the encompassing pieces that go with that. Time is of the essence, right? And for a lot of us, we just don't have enough of it, or as much of it as we think we need to be successful. But I'm here to tell you that you can absolutely still be very successful with gaining muscle mass, losing body fat, getting in better shape physically, endurance wise, all of that, even if you don't have, multiple hours every single day to dedicate to that. A lot of times I have clients come to me and they are thinking that they need to be training 4, 5, 6 days a week out of the 7 in order to see gains, in order to get in better shape. And although having more time can be helpful, it is not necessary. I mean it. We don't have to have all the hours in the day to make it happen. Let's be realistic here. We have lives, we have kids, we have jobs, we have social lives. We'd like to not just have to focus solely on fitness in order to be in shape, right? There needs to be other things. And truth be told, yes, a lot of us have aesthetic goals and we may have performance goals, but a lot of us also just want to do the fitness so that we are healthier for the long term and that we can enjoy other aspects of life. Like maybe you like to go kayaking, maybe you like to go hiking, maybe you want to be able to go on a long bike ride and it not totally kick your you-know-what. So what I want to talk about is how, again, getting the most bang for your buck out of a couple days a week of training, working really hard and making it happen. So let's start with the beginning. When it comes to strength training, typically we are going to want to aim for 2 to 3 days a week of getting in some strength training. This is, again, aiming on the, I don't have that much time, I'm not trying to get in the gym 24/7, okay? So we're gonna aim for 2 to 3 days a week of strength training. Now, 30 to 45 minutes of solid strength training in 2 or 3 days is going to be enough to get you there with those goals. Again, we're not talking about specifics of powerlifting meet, Olympic lifting meet, bodybuilding, all of that kind of stuff. But for the general population, we can do a lot with 2 to 3 days a week of strength training. And that may seem like it's not a lot out of the entire week, but if we are getting movement in, right, your non-exercise activity, going for walks, not sitting down too much during the day or breaking up your sedentary time by getting up, going to fill up your water, all those things, we can get by with 2 to 3 days of strength training. Our goal in those couple of days that we are getting in the gym is to hit your compound lifts, which I'm going to go over in just a second, as well as just work at a high intensity. Now, when I say intensity, I am not talking about it having to be super high heart rates. I'm not talking about having to superset and circuit every single exercise, although those things can be helpful when you're in a time crunch. But what I'm talking about is bringing in intensity to your training. That intensity can come from the circuits, the low rest periods, the supersets, but it also can come from things like load, from time under tension, and making sure that we are working hard in our sets. So one of the key factors, and maybe the most key factor to make sure that even if we're only training 2 to 3 days a week to make things actually happen, is to bring that intensity by making sure your sets are hard. So if you're back squatting, if you're deadlifting, if you're benching, let's say we're going for a set of 5, that set of 5 should be at an RPE or RIR of somewhere between an 8 to 9 RPE or a 1 to 2 RIR. And for those who don't know what those terms are, RPE, we're looking at rate of perceived exertion. So how hard you feel like you are perceiving that effort. or RIR, which is reps in reserve. And these two are kind of the same but opposite scales. Reps in reserve essentially is saying if I had to keep going, I could only do 1 to 2 more of these if I was at an RIR 1 or 2. I can only do 1 or 2 more reps at this load. Now, if most of your sets are being taken in that close to failure zone that we're talking about with the RPE and RIR, we know that you are putting in good effort and intensity into your workouts. One of the big mistakes I see is that people will come at it and they may hit their compound lift hard, but then they underload their accessory movements. They hit, you know, something at an RPE of maybe 6 or 7, meaning they could potentially do another 5, 6, 7 reps, if not more, at that load. And so they're just not getting as much out of it. So again, the first piece really is going to be that bringing intensity to your lifting by making sure that you are in an area that is close to failure, okay? So that's your big number 1 step. Number 2 is, if you are short on time, to get more bang for your buck, is to 1, make sure that you're including compound lifts across the board. So let's say we only have 2 or 3 days of lifting. We all love for like our biceps and whatnot to look good, your triceps to look good, your shoulders to look good, things like that. But we do want to make sure we're focusing on your main lifts. So typically what that looks like, a compound lift is going to be your squatting, your deadlifting, your benching, your overhead pressing. Those are really your basic compound lifts. Now that doesn't mean that you have to back squat, it doesn't mean that you have to conventional deadlift. You could be using dumbbells to do this, barbells, machines, eventually, but what we're looking at here is crossing more than 1 joint. So a back squat, right? You're gonna be working through your hips, knees, ankles. Those are multiple joints that are getting worked, right? If we're thinking about everything that's getting worked on during a back squat. So we want main big compound lifts. If you only have 2 to 3 days, that means you're probably going to be doing more than 1 compound lift per day. So an easy way to do that, if you are not wanting to completely destroy your legs, right, is you could back squat and then you could do some pull-ups. You could do a back squat and then do an overhead press. Typically, you know, order of that I'm not really that concerned with. I'm a bigger fan of doing my lower body one first because those tend to be more fatiguing than the upper body ones. But either way, getting in 2 of those and then following with some accessory lifts after that is a great way to make sure that you're hitting all of your compound lifts, even if you only have 2 to 3 days versus 1 compound lift per session. Now, as you're doing that, you may end up switching up the days you do it. You may end up swapping pairs and whatnot, but the main goal is, are we squatting, pushing, pulling, hinging, right? Those are the things that we're wanting to aim for. I'll put a list of them here of kind of your main lifts, right? We're looking at squat, deadlift, bench, overhead pressing, and like pull-up variations. I wanna make sure that I'm hitting all of those every single week. So I'll include 1 to 2 of those per training session, okay? So we've got 2 main things that I just talked about, right? We've got our bringing intensity to your lifting with being close to failure on all of your movements. And then the second piece is making sure we're including compound lifts and maybe doing 2 of those per day if you are short on days to make sure we're getting more of those in. Now, the third thing that I have started doing recently for myself, and I think that I find this is very helpful, this isn't a necessity, but it also allows you to kind of give up a little bit of that guilt you may have of not being able to get more days in, is to spread out your training over a 8 to 10 day period instead of a 7 day period. We're very set on how many times per week you are training, and that's all fine and good, but sometimes let's say you do want to get 4 days of training in, right? 4 different programmed days, but you're typically only getting 3 in. All you have to do with this is say, okay, on that 4th day that may be your following Monday, which is you're going into week 2, you're gonna do your 4th day of training. Then on day 2, you're gonna do day 1 of training, and so on. Your body doesn't know that you missed a day of training as long as you get it done. So giving yourself that kind of grace period to say, instead of on a 7 day cycle, I'm working on an 8 to 10 day cycle, I'm gonna get 4 days of lifting in, allows you to still get those 4 different days of training. You can get the volume of 4 days of training. We're just giving yourself a little extra time in between. So that's kind of a sidebar. I wouldn't say that's a necessity, but for me has helped a lot in letting me feel like I'm able to still get everything done, but I'm not stuck in this, I missed a day of training every single week. Now, the last piece that I want to discuss today is adding in those things like your supersets, your circuits, EMOMs, AMRAPs that will allow you to get more volume in a shorter amount of time. Now, do I think that these are always the best thing to do? No, I don't think that they cover every single goal. If you are looking more into hypertrophy versus endurance training, what have you, these may not always be the best, but it can allow you to get more training in, more volume in a shorter amount of time. So utilizing something that has some shorter rest periods, but still getting in that training can help you with making more gains at the end of the day, feeling like you're getting more out of your training. So the first one I mentioned is a superset. A superset is essentially where you pair 2 exercises together, back to back with minimal rest between. You can do these by doing similar muscle groups, or you can do opposite muscle groups. I'm a big fan of doing like an upper lower, or maybe doing a push pull, which allows you to do a little bit more volume on those movements. For example, if you were gonna do a leg day, you could do a goblet squat and then follow it with an RDL, right? So we've got a more quad dominant and then a more hamstring dominant movement. Do those back to back and have shorter rest in between, get more bang for your buck. If we were going to look into a push-pull, we could potentially do a lat pull down and then follow it with some push-ups. Again, opposite muscle groups here, right? So we're not necessarily having that interference of them being too fatigued, but allows you again to get more volume in a shorter amount of time. Typically, I would say you rest minimum 0 to 30 seconds between those 2 exercises. And then after you finish both of them, you can give yourself a 60 to 90, maybe 2-minute rest period after. The next option is a circuit. A circuit to me, I would say, is anything that's over 2 exercises. So 3+ exercises done right back to back after each other, again with short rest periods in between. And with that, a circuit can also be an AMRAP style, an EMOM style, things like that. But a circuit is essentially, again, just adding in multiple exercises without going back to that first exercise right away. So for example, we could do a goblet squat, a lat pull down, and then go into RDLs. That would be considered a circuit because there's 3 different exercises. Now, as you start adding more exercises back to back, recognize that your loads will probably come down just a bit. Even if it's different muscle groups, you will have some fatigue, some heart rate elevation due to the fact that you're not resting as much. So at the end of the day, right, we may see a little bit of negative effects as far as pushing more load. But again, as long as you're following RPE during that time frame, you're still getting a lot out of that. As far as the other ones I mentioned, AMRAPs and EMOMs, these 2 are both anagrams? Yes, anagrams that stand for as many rounds as possible or as many reps as possible, depending on what you're doing. And then EMOM stands for either every minute on the minute or even minute odd minute. These are simply time domains utilized to help keep you on track. So for example, you could do a 10-minute AMRAP, pick 3 exercises, and you're gonna cycle through those 3 exercises as many rounds as possible during that 10-minute bout. Again, it could be the goblet squat, the lat pull down, and the RDLs. Let's say you do 10 of each, go through those, rest as needed, but you're gonna get through as many rounds as you can in 10 minutes. Again, lots of volume in a short amount of time. When it comes to an EMOM, we're typically looking at either an every minute on the minute, like I said, or even minute odd minute. So even and odd minute essentially is my favorite way to do it because you can alternate 2 different exercises. This is very much like a superset style, but with some built-in rest. So typically you're going to build in some time to rest and not take up the entire minute. Typically I like to say do something that will work for 30 to 45 seconds of that minute for each exercise. So for example, let's say we're gonna do a goblet squat and a kettlebell swing. Even minute, you do 12 to 15 goblet squats, whatever time is remaining, you rest, and then same thing for that odd minute. Maybe it's 10 to 12 kettlebell swings, and then you rest the remainder of that minute. You would do a 10-minute EMOM, which would get you 5 rounds of those exercises. Again, short time domain, lots of volume. Now, none of these are things you have to do, but they are all different strategies that you can implement in order to just get more out of the time that you do have in the gym. Some things that you can think of outside of the gym that will help with keeping fitness up are things like getting in more steps, trying to do other things that are active, like going for a hike, going for a bike ride, kayaking, whatever it may be, to keep that level of fitness up. But again, you can make lots of gains with 2 to 3 days of strength training if you are working hard. Again, bringing that volume, bringing that intensity, using RPE and RIR to help you out with that, as well as adding in more volume and making sure that you're getting your compound lifts in. And then don't forget that you can do that longer split. Instead of doing in a 7-day period, look into an 8 to 10 day period to see if that can allow you to get more of those different days of training in and allow you to progress in more days of training, even if it's on a little bit longer of a cycle. So that's all I've got for you today. If you've got questions, thoughts, concerns, feel free to drop those below. I know I didn't touch too much on cardio. We can talk about that another time, and or if you have questions, you can drop those below. But for now, hopefully this helped give you some ideas to get more bang for your buck out of your training, even if you're short on time as a new mom, busy parent. If you are just busy with your job, you're in a busy season, hopefully this helps you out with making the most of it. So we'll catch you next time. Make sure to check things out on Instagram at StrongLikeShelby. Make sure you like this video if you enjoyed it and hit that subscribe button to never miss another update. So hope to talk to you guys soon. See ya.